we'll begin. Today is April 28th, 2023. My name is Angela Zussman, and I'm here for the Land Stories Oral History Project, interviewing Daryl Kaneshiro. Thank you so much for taking time to speak with me. If you could first just say and spell your name.
Oh, that's pretty easy.
Yeah, start easy.
Daryl Kaneshiro, Daryl Kaneshiro.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to start a little bit talking about the history of your family farm.
Okay.
Because I know it's been here a while. So how
Sure.
long has your family had this land?
Well, where do I start from when my grandfather came to Hawaii? And he, came from Okinawa in 1909 and to work on the sugar plantations. And he found a job in Oahu, working there. And about 1920, he moved to Kaua'i. Came here to Kaua'i and said, I'm going to work for the Koloa sugar plantation that was here, located in Koloa town. And he worked there for several years. But after getting married and getting kids, he worked for the plantation, which probably was paying less than $1 a day as wages. And he had 11 kids altogether within that period of time he was working with the plantation. So it was pretty hard for him, to survive doing that. And working with that kind of pay and trying to, make a living and make a go, especially with 11 kids. So he started farming his own. Probably, before he even had 11 kids, he started farming already. So, I got to supplement some food, I got to do this, I got to do that, besides working for the plantation, and which he did. Then after doing that, he finally went into full-time farming because he started farming chicken, turkeys, hogs, anything to supplement food. Potatoes, for the family. And while doing that, people, those days were mostly barter days. You take the food, hey, I got some potatoes, how about you give me some of your veggies? Or I have some turkey or meat, maybe you give me something, And he started doing that. And after a while, he opened a slaughterhouse right there in Koloa town, right where the Koloa ballpark is today. Not too far behind there was called Banana Camp, I believe, but we can check on that. And that's where he brought his family up, living in that area and farming. So they opened a slaughterhouse in Koloa to supply some of the local markets that were there and started slaughtering his turkeys, chickens, cattle, and hogs. And at the same time, he would take his, produce to the different markets or peddle it around town at the same time. So it all started then. And my dad...
Okay, I'm going to pause there for a
Okay.
second. Thank you. That's so rich. I have a
Okay.
couple of follow-up questions about your grandfather.
Okay, sure.
So
Go ahead.
what's his name?
Ushi, U-S-H-I, Kaneshiro.
Okay, and your mom?
And that's my grandfather.
Your grandmother.
My grandmother was, I can't remember now. What is it? Because I used to just call her, grandma. But I'll find her name. I'll get her name.
And
then.
how did grandma get here? Did she come with him?
No. Okay, that's very interesting. That's a very interesting question. Well, he was here. Of course, he was single. He was in Honolulu working, doing that. Then moved to Kauai. They did what we call a picture bride. Those were the old days of how, you send a picture to yourself to Japan. She sends a picture back, and through that, I guess he invited her to come to Hawaii, and then they got married. It's no more than nowadays you can go on a website and try to find a wife, or they even have this program going on now, Farmer's Wife. You probably heard about that, but it's on TV right now, where they have a farmer and okay, you can pick your wife or see how you guys are doing. So they did this in that days.
Right.
We're talking about the 1900s or early
Yeah, they say,
Hey,
oh, picture bride,
Yeah,
like it's exactly what people do now.
well, now, yeah, with all this
Yeah.
website, you know, they don't send a picture now. You can go on website and just punch in what
Exactly.
you want to find or what you want.
So they met through that
Right.
system, and then were they living in a camp provided by the plantation?
Yes, yes, they were living in a camp. Most of the plantation workers were living close in that areas also. But he had a home, and then I don't really know who owns the place, who owned the property. But at the same time, he started to farm, and there were other, you know, other families that worked on the plantation too, that were
And
located close by.
where did he farm? Because this sounds like it took some land to have all these animals
Well,
to
he had,
farm, and
I
then the
would say he had
slaughterhouse.
about, the way I'm looking at it today, in today's terms, probably about 8 or 10 acres. In those days, at least about 8 acres where he could farm potatoes. He would have his hog farm, he would have his turkey, he would have a slaughter facility.
Right there in Kaua'i
Right
town.
there in Kaua'i, on the backside of where the Kaua'i Park is today.
Because that's rare. The plantation worker would be able to acquire so much land.
Yeah, and he might have been leasing the land for I don't know how much, or they were probably just lending it to him. I got to find more history about that, but I really never, you know, look into it. And from there, he started the farm.
And you said that he would sort of peddle it to the markets and so forth. I know that the system arose.
Yeah, you can deliver to the markets. You had Suoka store there, the old time Kaua'i Suoka store. You had the meat market right down the street from there, right across the river. There's a river that comes down there now that comes off of Waitau Reservoir and goes all the way back down to Waikomo. So yeah, they had several small markets open, so you could take his goods there, or people would come over to his place and pick up goods also.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I could probably ask you 100 more questions about him, but we got to move forward in time.
Okay.
So, grandfather was very enterprising.
Yes.
Had he worked as a farmer in Okinawa?
Not to my knowledge. The farthest I would go back is when he came here to Honolulu in 1920 to work for the plantation. My grandmother, even though she was a home mom, she was also, she used to make the raincoats for the plantation workers, and she would also help in the garden. So yeah, they all helped in order to build, the farm.
Right. Okay, and then they had 11 children.
Yes.
And of that 11, where did your father come in?
My father was like, remember, he was like number, I would say he was like number 10 maybe, or around that, or 9 in the family, number 9.
Okay, so tell me about his childhood.
Or no, I would say number 3 or 4 if you go backwards. Right?
Okay. Not the beginning.
Yes.
Not the last one, though.
So
but-
he was like the 3rd or 4th one that was born within the family.
So he had some people to show him the ropes.
Well,
A
some
few.
brothers.
Some brothers.
Brothers and sisters, or mostly brothers. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so
Around
what
the
was
third.
that like for him growing up now on the family farm with the dad still working on the plantation, or maybe he had...
No, he wasn't anymore. They were farming. So at that time they were farming. They were doing a lot of farming there. And Dad, of course, the war broke out in 1946, or 1942, right? So they all volunteered to go to war under the 442, 442nd Battalion, which was made up of a lot of the Japanese, and then they would send them to different places like Italy and France and so forth. But it's more of a historian thing than I know about. But he did serve.
And it
in
was
the
a big deal
442.
for your
They
family.
call it the Go Full Broke Battalion.
Why do they call it that?
Because they were the guys that would charge. They're out there in the field. You send them to wherever in Italy. I mean, they're out there charging, Or that's why they probably call them Go For Broke, B-R-O-K-E.
And being of Japanese origin,
Yes.
how was that? Did your family ever talk about it? Talk about that
Not
with
really,
you?
because we don't, at those days you don't really talk about it, except we have pictures showing him at different places at that age when he volunteered, and yeah, I mean, was typically, if you think about it, was real hard for United States, being that Japanese was one of the ones that attacked Pearl Harbor, right? I mean, and then you got all these guys from Hawaii that volunteer to go and fight. We're, so what? I'm a United States kind of a guy. I'm here. I love Hawaii, so I'm going to go to war. And this is how they formed that group called 442. But you can get more history of that by reading the books, So he did, and in 1946 he came back around that time, and then when they found that my grandfather was still farming, not enough room for all of them to be there, so they bought some parcels here in Omao in 1946 to farm. So that's how they started. My dad started farming in 1946. He started a poultry business. Then I had his brother started a hog business all around that time, and grew from there.
So how many of the 11 siblings went to fight in the war? Do you know?
I'm not certain.
Some more or less.
That's more.
Yeah.
You got to go back and look at the family history,
So when your father's name was?
Satoshi. His nickname is Sugar, because I guess in Sato or something is sugar in Japan, so they call him Sugar.
Do you speak Japanese?
No, negative.
Just a few words.
I know a few words.
Right. So your father came back from the war, and there wasn't enough space at your father Ushi's farm for all of them. So he was able to purchase land. Do you know who he bought the land from?
I'm not certain. We got to go back and, hey, I'm 75 now, It's been a while.
Okay, I'll forgive you.
Dad would have been 100 today or 100 something today, so it's been a while.
But at that
but they
time,
did buy it from families that probably were farming here in this area, and probably they gave it up to do other stuffs, besides farming. And my dad first got into farming, poultry farming and hog farming.
any idea what kind of farming the previous landowners did, or if they were Hawaiian, or we got to ask him. we got to call you.
There's some history on it. One of my cousins did a family history, so he may know some of that. And I'll give you his name, so for reference like that, you can talk to him about, that side of the family, how many of them did this, all of that. So
good.
He did the historian part about the family.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. I'll appreciate that.
So you can.
I'll check it out with him. What's your cousin's name?
Niles Kageyama.
Okay, I'll get back to you about that. So the land that your father purchased, is this place where we're sitting right now part of that original farmland?
No, not at all. This was all sugarcane land. My dad and my uncle bought about almost 18, 20 acres in what we call Omao now. It's across from where we're at right now, because this is part of Lawai, and started farming.
So like up Omao Road area?
Yeah, right there, across from Omao Park, from the park where it's at right now. That's all Kaneshiros. If you drive down Noho Road, you'll find a dead end, Kaneshiros.
So your family still has the land?
Yes, they're still there. In fact, I have my residence there.
That's right, we're
Across
neighbors.
the street.
We're all
I'm not
neighbors.
here. I don't have any residence there. I can't afford my own place. At today's prices, the way the market price is to build a house.
I mean, that's something to talk about too. I'd be
but
curious, maybe your cousin knows how much your dad paid for those.
that piece of property.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He probably has some of that information,
Yeah.
I remember them talking to me about it, but it's been a while.
So your dad grew up on his father's farm, And then came back from the war and decided to be a farmer himself.
Yeah.
Purchased some land in Omao. And what kind of farm did he set up there? You said poultry.
He did poultry farming. At that time, poultry farming was big for the island of Kaua'i. There were many on the islands, not only just him. There were several in Lawai. There was some in Kalaheo. Madera's farm was one of the last ones here that was doing chicken farming.
Madero's farm.
Yes.
Yep, still there?
They're out.
Oh.
All the poultry businesses are out right now.
Oh.
And we grew up working on a poultry farm.
Why poultry?
Because already my cousins or his brother or my uncles already had the hog farm. So he figured, it would be a great idea, do poultry farming too. He can supply the restaurants, supply the stores with the eggs, and also he had his own processing plant. So he built his own processing plant where he could process the chickens, and we would be the ones after high school or after school cleaning. We're the ones there. Those days I couldn't go to any football games because we used to kill chicken Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. So there was no such thing for me to go to a football game because we got to work, we got to kill the chickens, slaughter chickens, get it ready for delivery. So that was the farm days, that we used to do that all the way till after I graduated.
So the slaughterhouse that your grandfather owned, you didn't bring the chickens there, or they didn't?
No,
they didn't process.
It was all done here in Omao. Yes.
That probably took him some time to build that up.
Yeah, and then by that time, the slaughterhouse down there in Kaua'i already closed down, right?
Okay.
By the time my dad started doing it, so, it takes a while to get it going, doing all this stuff. It could have still been going on, because I was born in 1948. I remember going to the slaughterhouse and seeing them do that, but it was mostly for cattle, for livestock that he was slaughtering. Not too much on the turkey side anymore, hardly on the chicken side, because we were doing all of that, the poultry side.
And meanwhile, there was a different kind of industry coming up in Kaua'i, right? There were the stores that were opening there, a lot of them Japanese owned.
Right.
So how did your family kind of fit in with some of the other families, that we still see some of their stores, Suioko, some of the stores that are still there today?
Well, that's a very good question, because what happened is I had one of my uncle, Daryl Kaneshiro, that passed away recently. He opened his own market in Kalaheo called Kaneshiro Market. We have pictures of it that shows in there. But previous to that, what he used to do was he would take whatever produce or whatever we farmed through the family or whatever he could get and peddle it around town in a van. He had a van that he would drive around town. He would go to Kaua'i and like a shake the bell, or like an ice cream guy where you shake, and then people would come and buy it there. So after doing that for quite some time, then he opened a store called Kaneshiro Market in Kalaheo. So all of this, from farming here locally, doing it here locally, raising the hogs, to peddling here, there, maybe around Kaua'i area, plantation areas or places like that, because I remember him driving, his little pedal truck with a van that you open the side and there's like candies and stuff like that. That's all we used to look for, right? Candies and small things. And then I remember when he opened a store too in Kalaheo.
And is that store still around?
No, it's not. That all closed down too.
Okay.
After a while. Then he focused more on just raising hogs, doing the hog business. Mm-hmm. And my dad continued to do the poultry business.
Okay, interesting.
Until, my brother was drafted into the army, into Vietnam. And then I left to go to college. My dad said, we already got one in Vietnam. You better get your butt and go to college someplace. So in 1966, after I left, then he closed the chicken farm down because he had no one else to work on the farm.
Okay, so we'll get back to that.
Okay.
But thank you for letting me kind of go back and forth in time a little bit. So he's got the chicken business going, and he got married, did he meet a local girl or
Oh yeah,
your dad?
yeah. My dad married a local. My mother is from Koloa town. Yes, her mom used to own the only one dry cleaner in Koloa town, right behind where the bank was, and yeah, I mean,
And her maiden, what's her full name?
Dorothy Gushikane.
So she's also of Japanese descent.
Yes, she's Japanese and some Hawai'i in there, and that's why I pulled the Hawai'i side a little bit.
Oh, that's where it came from.
My mom.
Okay, so then they got married, and how many kids did they ultimately have together?
There's 5 of us.
Only 5.
Only 5. I have a brother, 2 years older than I am, myself, and I have sisters, 3 sisters.
Okay, so now tell us in all its glory and gory detail what it was like for you as a child growing up on a chicken farm in Omao.
I liked it. It was great, except it was hard work. Like I said, I had to get friends and high school friends or buddies of mine, even from grammar school days, come up and help me so I can dig out and go surfing once I finish my job. But the slaughter days, we couldn't because we had to be there. We slaughter in the evenings or late afternoon. But the rest of the days or weekends, because if not, we would work every weekend too. Sundays, they would come up early, help me. Then I can go down and go surf and do things like that. So it was an everyday work. Everyday working. Yeah. There was no such thing as no work at all, especially on a farm like that.
So no holiday, really?
No. Are you kidding? Holidays.
Who would take care of it if you weren't going to?
Who's going to feed the chickens?
So was that one of your
Who's
first
going to
jobs?
clean the eggs? I mean, we collect the eggs every day. We got to collect the eggs, bring it in, run it through the machines, scale the eggs, make sure it's small, medium, large, extra large, clean the eggs, pack it all up, get it ready for the next day. Do the same thing every day.
So what was one of your favorite jobs on the farm as a child?
Hunting the doves.
Was that an official job or when
Well,
they...
you got to figure those days, a lot of the birds used to do a lot of damage for the feed. They used to buy a lot of feed. So we had to do that. We had to maintain it somehow, to keep the birds away. How are we going to do that? There were rats, a lot of rats too. And we used to do nighttime hunting with the rats too. We got very professional doing that too, with the dogs, and you wouldn't believe how good the dogs were. Where I could just see the tail sticking out of the trough like this, and I sneak up from the back, I grab the tail and throw it on the ground, and the dog kills it. I mean, that's the truth. I mean, those were the days, when we had to do something, because you got the rats in there that are probably eating a lot of the feed. You have the birds during the day eating a lot of feed too. So that was all part of the farm life, besides the hard work you gotta do.
Okay, so hunting rats by whatever means was one of your favorite jobs. What was one of your least favorite jobs?
Scooping crap up. Somebody got rid of all the chicken manure. Somebody got to get rid of all, you got chicken waste out there. So there's a way you got to clean it out. Once in a while you got to go in there under the pens and scoop them into wheelbarrows and move it out, take it out to the gardens or wherever you could. But that was a hard job, especially pushing the barrel around, and we never had those fancy ATVs like you have today where you can pull a trailer and throw them in the back and go. Man, we had to push them all in wheelbarrows and make your way around, and then dump it at a certain place so Dad could use it for fertilizer or whatever, but you still would have to take it out from under the coop. So that was a pretty hard job.
And sounds like everything was used on the farm.
Yeah, just about, of course. Yeah, you use it for fertilizer, and except the rats, we just dump it. But we could eat the birds, so doves, which was pretty cool, pretty good. I mean,
Well, you get tired of eating chicken all the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so sounds like a pretty nice life growing up. You found some time for school, some time for surfing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you the first surfer in your family?
Um, I would say, yeah, one of the more, aggressive one that would go and try to be down there as much as I could after doing all the work.
And who was surfing in those days? Just a little aside of surf history here.
Oh, well, you have all the local guys down there that are still hanging around or probably around. We're talking, this was in the early 62, so I have pictures of all those guys. I can show you, many of them that were surfing those days in Kaua'i.
Where would you go surfing?
Right down there in Poipu Beach.
Poipu Beach.
Yes, right out there. That used to be, we started a surf club called Mokeana Surf Club and all that in 1962.
1962.
Yeah, so
Okay. All right. So then you managed to get your way through high school, and then tell us again, Vietnam War.
Besides that, before even in high school, I used to do I participated in the FFA program, Future Farmers of America. So my dad had me grow my own veggies. I had my own vegetables growing, different crops growing, and we used the old water system that the plantation had. The plantation had a water system running through the land to take the water to different reservoirs. So we would use that, and at the same time use that to water our crop that we harvest and try to sell to show for the FFA program, Future Farmers of America program. So I was involved in that also.
How did you like it?
It was great. I mean, yeah, it was great. Especially at our time. I mean, we had a lot of kids in the program. 40 maybe, or more, all participating in this program.
And the 40 kids in that program, tell me a little bit about them. Was it a pretty diverse group? Was it mainly Japanese?
No, very, very diverse group. And it's all about learning how to farm, about farming practices. The Kaua'i School did have a small little farm in the back that they can go and learn, and where they had, from even growing cattle, how to do that, and doing chickens, and also raising vegetables and crops. So it was a great program. Plus you had to sit in the classroom too and listen, It's not about just out there doing things. Go to a classroom first, then you go out and start to do that.
Is there anything comparable to that here today?
They still do. They still have, but I don't see as much students participating as compared to those days, our days. We had a lot of kids participating.
Why do you think less participation now?
I mean, who wants to farm nowadays? It's hard work. Farming is not an easy life. It's a very hard life. And for people to learn basic farming, it takes time, it takes practice. Either you come from a farm that has been farming for centuries, you can carry over the traditional way of farming. But to start on your own while in high school or right out of high school is not a very easy occupation. And especially in today's opportunities there are.
How did your dad's business interact with the plantations? Because the plantations were still going up until around when?
Yeah. He was very active. I remember when the plantation had a strike, and they were low on food. The workers were low on food. We had to slaughter more chickens so you could help and donate to some of the families. So I mean, a lot of that happened, those days too. And a lot of the plantation workers would also come and help on the farm. So those were the days that, how you can really interact with the plantation workers to farming. By also for what they're helping to do, in return, he would provide them some chicken or food also.
So it's still a little bit of the barter system.
Yes, yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Did he have hired help on his farm, or was it all family?
Was all family. Yeah.
So just him and his two sons?
Yeah, and the 3 girls.
His daughters also?
Yeah, but they would help mostly when we do the eggs, cleaning the eggs and stuff like that.
We just took a little pause to take care of the sheep. That's life on the farm, huh?
Every day, never know.
Right?
Every single day.
Talk about relentless. Well, you were speaking with us about, as a child growing up on the farm,
Yeah.
your parents had a chicken farm. How many chickens, more or less, did they
Oh, a
have?
couple thousand. You know, we used to bring them in. He used to hatch the eggs at one time. We had incubators and all that. And eventually he would just, you could fly it in on the airlines from the mainland and get it here. Get it here real fast. It's little chicks, and then from there raise them up. And either get laying hens or you got fryers or roasters, different breed. Yeah, you use 2 different breeds of chicken, depends what it, if you want the eggs or for meat. Yeah, so
You know, I'm thinking back to several times you go to the market now and there's no chicken. Or like in COVID, you know, there was kind of a stretch of time there was no chicken. So I know I'm jumping ahead a lot, but back in the day of your dad's chicken farm, was most of the chicken sold here on the island locally produced?
Yeah. But all the chickens that either we would have people that come over to the farm and buy. We had a place where they could come. We had the eggs all stacked up and sell it by the dozen. And they would come and buy, or he makes deliveries to the restaurants. Remember going to a restaurant called Club Jetties down in Wili Wili? He would take it there, and that's how I became real good friends with the owners. And different stores, he would take the chickens to different stores and deliver also. Besides having people come to the ranch and buy.
And
Or to the
over
farm.
time it's become less local poultry.
Well, yeah, because labor costs are high. A lot of family move on. They don't really spend their time back on the ranch. Kids, move out, go to college, go to different areas, rather than working on the farm. So everyone realized how hard it is, right? But those days, our parents said we were working on values and all. You learn a lot of that by working on a farm, because they said, you want to go someplace, finish your farm work first, then go, because the animals got to eat, no matter what. But they got to be taken care of. You got to harvest the crop, because tomorrow can get larger. It will be what we call an MQ, which is out of the size, and it will be a cheaper price. So you got to watch all these things and do all of that. So it's every day.
So you were steeped in that lifestyle, and then you went away to college.
Yes.
Did you go to the mainland?
Yes.
And I'm sure you have a lot of interesting stories for that, but what is it that brought you back to Kaua'i after you received your degree? Or if you did finish your college degree?
Yeah, and then I came back after college, and of course we still had the property, and my family was still farming. My dad's side, not our side, because we gave up the poultry farm after my brother left for the army and I went away to college. I don't know, I just came back to Kauai, probably liking the lifestyle, missing the lifestyle of being home and farming again, and we just started farming once more again. Not as big as we are today, but raised some animals here and there. Helped my dad. My dad was always farming, so he always had his own little garden in the back. He had his green beans growing, pumpkins growing, avocados growing. He had all his trees planted. Even though after we left and he closed the farm, he joined the carpenter union and became a carpenter. And after work as a carpenter, he would come home and he would still farm on the weekends and do things like that. So we used to help him too.
Was
when
that
we came
hard
back.
for him, do you think? Was that a hard decision to close down the poultry farm?
Well, at that time, yes, it was really hard because I was into a year or so in college and I was come back and he was still trying to keep it going, but it was really hard. You know, without the help, especially running a poultry farm wasn't easy at all. So after that, you know, either mom or the kids convinced him that you gotta close it, find a job outside, and at the same time you could still farm because you have the land. Yeah,
So that was tough.
very.
And he became a carpenter.
Yes.
And what did he specialize in with carpentry?
Been going out and working on a lot of the construction, the big construction jobs. Nukuli'i was coming up, many of the big hotels, renovation coming up. You know, we're talking about the 60s, yeah, late 60s, early 70s, when all the hotels were doing renovations, starting to build up, starting to get bigger. Marriott down in Kaua'i Bay started to expand. So there were a lot of jobs for him. But at the same time, he always kept his gardens going and then selling the vegetables to people that would take it to the Sunshine Market.
And what was Omao like in your childhood days? You know, now it's kind of suburban, you know, paved roads,
Yeah.
a lot of families living there. What was it like back in the day?
It was mostly a farm community. Our days was, if you look at it, you know, all Maderas, Vidina, those family were all either cattle and farming. It was always farming. And that's how many of them got to buy a large tract of land because they would farm. And till today, you don't see much of that because many of them sold out and got out of the farming business. When I came back, you know, I know it was tough, but I didn't want to lose a couple acres that we had. So we had to try to do something to try to at least, you know, make some money to keep the land. So we knew we couldn't farm full time, so I had to go out and work too. I had to go find jobs. I became more into a business type of person. I started opening different stores. Expressions was one of the clothing stores I opened, and got into different type of businesses. And at the same time, come back and try to work the land as much as we could.
So you moved back to your parents' property in Omao.
Yes, and eventually I bought one of the properties adjoining. Was used to be a cattle farm, a cattle ranch, and I was fortunate. Well, let them sing for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
Great sound, though. Great sound.
You know, the background.
My dog is joining the chorus somewhere.
If I yell at them, they'll stop. But
Yeah,
let them go for now. Let them enjoy.
We'll wait till the.
They'll settle down.
Uh,
See,
I wonder if it hurts their ears.
they never used to. Only when the little ones started. My two younger ones started. My older ones never did howl. You know, but then the little ones, I guess, started. The two young ones, the
So
big one and the
old
other one.
dogs can learn new tricks.
And then they started doing that.
Oh, that's funny. So okay, so you came back. What did you study in college?
I actually did animal husbandry. I wanted to be a veterinarian, you know, and because we were always working with animals, you know, whether even we still had some animals at the farm, horses, you know, dogs as usual, few pet pigs running around, you know, and so that's what I went to college for, but never made it. Then I came back here and try to figure out ways how we could save the land that we had and work hard to do that also. And also for me to expand, to buy I think we need to buy more land besides what we already have.
What made you think that you needed to buy more land? It was so hard to just preserve the land that you had, so why did you want to expand that?
Because sugar was going out of business. And, we were always brought up where sugar was always the main business for this island, and not only this island, but for the state of Hawaii. And there were a lot of land coming out and being available at a reasonable price at that time, So our idea was, since I had some cattle, maybe I could expand the cattle business by getting more land or buying a few more acres. We can expand into different ways of trying to make farming more profitable, so at least we can keep the land we have plus pay for the land we buy. And it just all came about for farming and not for speculation at all.
So it was zoned agricultural.
A lot of the land around us and even here was zoned agriculture
Why?
because it was always in sugar.
But thinking strategically, politically, at that time, anything could have happened with the land. Why do you think that they kept it zoned agricultural?
Because the comprehensive zoning ordinance was specific about agricultural land, and that was passed in 1972, was always how do you preserve ag lands. It was very critical. They didn't know that a lot of the sugar lands were going out. There's going to be a lot of vacant land on the island, and land that is, probably very, very productive, but at the same time, once the sugar industry went out, majority of the land was just sitting there.
And you had talked about there were some hotels being built and renovated, but tourism was not yet anywhere near the economic force that it is now.
Yeah, it was starting to. Yeah, tourism was starting to build. But again, you're moving out of the one of the biggest industry here on the island in the state of Hawaii, which is sugar. And then all of a sudden all this land became available. It's sitting there and being overgrown and fallow. You're looking at all of this and said, hey, maybe I should get more into business. Maybe I can expand my cattle operation instead of couple, do more than couple, and buy more land to do that. So I was always driven about agriculture, coming from a family that farmed from generations, for over 100 generations, to do that. So it was kind of like in my blood. I was hoping I came from a development family, and we could buy all this land, and I wouldn't be sitting here on a farm. I'll be flying around in a jet, cruising around the world probably today. But it's in our blood to do that, to farm and preserve the land.
Which is beautiful. We're talking about more of that in a moment. I'm curious though, because there does seem to be a little bit of shift now happening in terms of the development of the land.
Yes.
And some of the land that has been zoned agricultural, there's more of maybe a desire to develop it for other things. How do you see that, or do you see any kind of shift happening with all of this beautiful verdant land here still being maintained as ag land?
Not really. There's not a big shift, because remember, there's zoned land here for commercial properties, for commercial area. We knew, I was surfing down in Poipu Beach all the time and looking at that hills, and I knew it was going to be a resort area one day, because it was always in a resort district. Growing up here, playing down at the beach, surfing in Poipu Beach, swimming, diving, all in that area where the Sheraton was. We knew it. It's going to happen. A lot of this land was already zoned for it in resort areas and doing things like that. But if you look at the land today, there's not much agricultural land that is zoned for commercial. Very little. In fact, almost none. And I don't see a big shift where a lot of this is going to be zoned for commercial. I do see hopefully a shift that will be zoned for more affordable housing or more what we call farmers type of farming land, small acreage where you can farm. But, under the current laws, we can't do that. I mean, I got 100 acres that I sit in here that I can only build 3 houses on. When I would love to build more and have more of housing for people. But, until it's the whole concept of the CZO changes, it's not going to happen. So everybody think it's just going to pop up like that. No, in reality it won't. Because there's land all in Poipu, all in the backside where Grove Farm has. They're only, so most of that is zone agriculture. Majority of all the land. You can go all the way back to where Zuckerberg is buying today. Those are all agriculture zones. It's not changed. Now what do you do with that kind of land? Could we do affordable farm housing? I mean, you got to think out of the box, because right now housing is one of the most difficult things for anyone to be able to be here and survive, or even to start up a new business. In reality, and it's not getting cheaper; it's getting more and more expensive. You can't even find a rental today. Negative. So, but I would love to put a few more homes here where I could either rent out, and have people live in and do affordable rentals. But we can't, because we've got to preserve this land.
And that's important too.
It is to an extent that either you can afford it or you can't. It costs money to even to cut this grass right here today. It costs money to even keep a road coming to your ranch. It costs money to fix a fence today. It costs a lot of money to put infrastructures on. And the price is ridiculous today. It's not like the old days where you can go to the old hardware store and, hey, maybe I give you 2 heads of cattle and you give me, a couple rolls of barbed wire or a couple rolls of fence. Those days are gone. So it's hard. And it costs a lot of money.
So you've had to be pretty clever in figuring out how to monetize.
Yeah, or just work 7 days a week.
Maybe a little both. Okay, so you
Not
came
much
back.
choice.
So you had a few head of cattle, you said,
Yeah.
and you wanted to, grow it. So you did.
Yes, we did. We leased this land. This was all fallow land, almost 300 acres from Lawai to Koloa town.
You leased it from?
The Knutson Trust. Knutson family owned this. This was all in sugarcane, remember. So we leased the land.
And we're talking about this land that we're on right now.
Yes.
Omao Ranch
Yes.
land, as you call
Here.
it.
Because we talked a little about my land, which is, just a couple acres that
In
we had
Omao.
there. In Omao, correct. Which the family still has, just a couple acres there. No more than maybe, so it's the same amount, 14 acres that they originally had. And I have a couple acres that I bought to expand my site in Omao. A couple acres that I bought. So we had to find more land to ranch cattle because we didn't have enough land to do that. So I leased this land from the Knutson Trust. And we did all the improvements on this land. This land was fallow, was just in sugarcane, was just closed up. So there were a lot of remnants of sugar growing here and there in spots. A lot of the roads were still open. The sugar field roads were all open all the way to Koloa town. So we had to come in here and take a good look at it and said, maybe we could turn this into cattle land. And working with the Knutson Trust, that's what I was able to do. There was a lot of work doing this, where we had to take out a lot of, this was a junkyard. Most of the sugar land, as you know, the roads weren't closed, were all open, so people would dump all the junks in there, cars in there. So we had to do all of that. And of course, there was no fence being in sugar. So we had a fence from Lawai all the way down to Koloa town.
And what about, you said the land was fallow, so how was the soil health?
For cattle, was great for us. But you could see how much the grass was growing.
Yeah.
All the guinea grass was just popping up all over the place. So, you know, for us, it wasn't about growing crops. It was about raising cattle, raising, you know, animals on it. So it worked out great for us.
Is that one of the reasons why you chose to raise cattle instead of crops?
Yeah, because we had all the, we have the natural rain here. There wasn't water anymore, because remember the plantation closed up, so all this place did not have the original water lines or water access ways where you can get access to run crops on the top part, on the cane land, or on the sugar cane land, because it was all shut down. They had pumps running from Koloa down here, almost Koloa town, up here to water the cane. It was all shut down. And I can show you all the pump houses and where they were and all that. So we said cattle would be great.
So to be clear, you're talking about the Hawai'i system
Yes.
that the plantations inherited
Right.
and maintained.
Correct.
Right.
Was
And
already shut
when they
down.
closed, no one was maintaining those systems. So the infrastructure still existed.
Yes.
And to this day, some of that infrastructure
Still
exists.
is.
We
But
have-
it's getting more deteriorated and deteriorating because nobody's upkeeping it.
right.
And it's the same thing. They had a pump house here that would pump the water all the way back here and water all the way back to Koloa town. So for us, we felt the only way to do it is haul in water if we got to haul in water and raise cattle.
Who technically is responsible for the water system now?
I'm not certain.
Whoever it is not doing anything.
Well, you know, each big landowner, because the water sources come from the large landowners. So that's a question you got to pose to those guys, like Grow Farm or Knudsen Trust. We have just a small stream that runs through here, called Poelele Stream, that goes down by Suoka Store and comes out by Koloa, by Waikomo, right there by the golf course. But it's not sufficient enough to be able to maximize to use for agricultural crop up in these areas, because you're going to have to pump it up too. Very difficult to do that. So, and that's the reason why we run cattle up in these areas, from here, sheep to Koloa town.
So you arranged this lease with the Knudsen Trust, which was mutually beneficial.
Yes.
Because you were helping to clean up the land and to
Correct.
make it usable, but you weren't the owner of the land. So how did that feel to you, leasing land, but putting so much energy and investment into land that wasn't yours?
Well, I think, you know, it was always at the idea that the cattle industry would help pay off for what we put into this. All the infrastructure, whatever, we had the fence. We always thought that we would still get a return from running cattle in these areas, you know, which we did enough to keep the land in cattle and enough to pay the lease, but wasn't where you were making enough money to survive on, because we were still working. I was still working other jobs full time.
Wow.
You know, I had like 2 or 3 jobs working full time besides trying to do cattle.
Did you expect that? Did you expect that you would still have to hold all those other jobs, or did you think that cattle?
Well, yeah, because, you know, how else you can be able to do the infrastructure? You know, cattle takes a while. It takes a year or 2 before you get any return after you start breeding them and getting your heifers and getting all them and finally getting your market beef. You know, it's going to take a while. We know we couldn't grow crop up here. It's pretty hard, because where are you going to get the water from? That's very costly too, to bring water up to these areas. So at the same time, I had to work like 2 or 3 jobs to be able to pay for that and to be able to pay for my family and to be able to survive and pay the lease. So
And was it just you, or was your brother or your dad involved in this cattle business?
no, it was just me. It was just me on my side, with some partners, you know, and friends that we all would do the cattle side together. So at least we took this fallow land and turned it into something more useful. And the Knudsen family or Knudsen Trust was very happy about that, to see that we revitalized the property, got cattle on it. And when they partitioned off the land, the Knudsen family partitioned off the land in, I believe it was 19, oh, it was about, where are we right now?
2023.
So it was in about around 19 or the early 2000, they partitioned off the land, where much of this land that were fallow was given to different heirs of the Knudsen family. They would split it, where the Moyer family would have some, the Baldwin family would have some of the Knudsen family would have some, and the trust would still hang on to the properties that were the hotels are, the land where most of the hotels are, so the money would still come into the trust. So this was given to the Moyer family, which is part Knudsen.
Moyer?
Pearl Moyer, we have Moyer Gardens in Poipu, plantation gardens. There was part of a Knudsen family also.
How do you spell their name?
Moir.
Moir.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And she saw how much work I was doing on this land, you know, with all the, how we cleaned the land up, how we fenced it all the way to Koloa Town. And this land, I guess somehow through what we call the papaya hotline or something, was Knudsen family made a decision that they were wanting to sell the property. So there was this big, huge company that came in that wanted to do an agricultural subdivision of this property, put an offer for this land, for the almost 300 acres from Lawai to Koloa. And Pearl saw me one day and said, you know, Daryl, I can't sell this land to a developer. I want to sell it to someone like you that had worked on this land, had turned this land into, you know, a really nice piece of property. And I laughed at her because I thought she was joking. And I said, you're not serious, are you? She said, no, I'm serious. We have a solid offer right now for all of this land from Lawai to Koloa. But I have made a decision that I don't want to sell it to a developer. I want to sell it to you. I want you to keep it the way it is. More so, I laughed. And I told her, you know, I'm a council member today. I have another business. I have all kinds of business. I don't know how in the world I'm going to pay for this land. I can't match a developer. There's no way I can do that. She looked at me and she said, no, we'll help you figure it out somehow. She said, just give me a check for so much, and then we'll call these guys off. Just give me a check, say it, and I'll tell them it's a down payment. Then I'll shut these guys off. And then we'll sit down and we'll work out something. And which we did. So I still have the original check that I wrote that had to go to one of the companies, like title companies. And then we sat down and we worked it out. I mean, I had to match the price, which was another thing I laughed about. I said, I don't care what the hell I got to lose. I mean, you know, for the amount I put down, for you said it's little amount to put down for land that, you know, we've worked millions. I'm not a gambler. I don't go to Vegas. What the heck? What's the big deal with this deposit, you know? So I did. And we worked it out, where she would sign things over for me so I can start CPR in the land.
Well, you could start, sorry, what?
So I could start developing the land or CPRing the land so I can make some sales for and limit the amount of homes on the land, on the dwellings, and cut down from what we call a regular agricultural subdivision. And she let me go ahead and start doing it.
What year was this?
2006.
Oh, so not that long ago.
No, I just bought it in 2006.
Oh, dang. So you kind of kept going as a cattle farmer
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
At how many?
Maintaining the land.
How many head of cattle, more or less?
Oh, we're running about 80, 90, almost 100 sometimes
Okay.
from here to Koloa.
That's 100 head of
Yes,
cattle,
yeah.
which
And
is
then
how
we're
many?
building our sheep business up too at the same time. So we had cattle and sheep.
And were you still working multiple other jobs?
Of course.
So the cattle and sheep farming never really.
I mean, it wasn't enough, to even start paying them back start paying for what I purchased this for. So I had to make payments eventually, while trying to develop and sell the land.
So I can imagine you had mixed feelings when she came with that opportunity, because obviously you had a desire to increase your land ownership.
Well, yes, but it's whether you can afford it or not, babe. The truth is right there. I mean, tell me, what do you want? That's all you want? Okay, fine. $1,000, put it down. What's the risk?
Well, you said you're not a gambler, but that was a pretty big risk, right?
Well, for $1,000, for $1 million worth of land,
Oh,
I mean, well, of course you still got to pay for it, right? I mean, it's public record, 8.5 million or whatever it was. I still would have to pay for it somehow. I don't know how, but at least if I didn't, $1,000 would fly away, and hell, right? I mean, if you think about it. But then, as you look at the land and you said, there is some value in this land. I think we can make it work where at least we can get it paid back, so I can pay them off. And at the same time, we don't have to own the whole 300 acres. If we can have half, that's 150 more acres than I really have right now today. So what do I get to lose if you think about it? If I can do it, if I can pull this off. And that's when you just take the jump and go, like jumping off of a waterfall and not knowing how deep it is. Hopefully you end up in a pretty good deep waterfall.
so where did you end up? Did you end up in a nice deep pool?
Well, no, I struggled. I've been struggling all the way through, where I could at least come up for air and then go back down and said, now how am I going to figure this out tomorrow? What's next? I mean, I have nothing else. What I'm going to do? And work for it, and I was lucky enough that we had time to, because before they could turn over, or before I made my final payment, they had to do a title search for all of this land. And fortunately for me, this land was in land court and also the regular court system, but they had Knutson land. They never had a title search done on this parcel at all, on this whole big parcel. So even when he went over to the Moyer family, when they were trusted the land and given the land, they never did a title search. So they had to do one. And it took them over a year because they had to go back to 1840, before the Great Maele, all the way back to then. 1846, someplace around there. That far back to check and do a title search. So it took them about a year and a half. At the same time, she gave me the opportunity to start developing the land and start selling some parcels so I can get the money to start paying back, and also to be able to run the water systems and do all of that here on this property.
So the water system, that
Yes.
means kind of re-engaging the Kaua'i system?
No, we had to do the county water system, where I have a pump house down by Omao Road, and with the pump house, we pump the water up to a tank that I have up here. With that, it would feed all the houses back here. So there's no Hawai'i system that I relied on for water, for the development that I did for the homes here in the partials so it could sell.
It sounds like that Pearl
Moyer.
Moyer, she was really thinking about the legacy of this land, of how to
Yes.
take care of it.
Yes.
It wasn't as much maybe about the money, but about the island.
Right.
So can you speak to that sort of philosophy of land management?
Well, she saw how much I was really dedicated to the land, of how I really took care of the land, and how, whatever I could do, whatever resources I had to develop this land. She knew it was really hard for me to do it, but she saw how hard we worked, how hard I worked, how hard if I had to use my hand to clean the land, to make it look good, I did. How do we preserve all of that? I preserve all the rocks here on the land itself. How do we do all of that? We stack it in certain ways, we put it in certain areas. We use it for certain water systems that were already running through here, the old water systems that we had and so forth, which wasn't part of the plantation system, but was spring waters coming through and all of that. It was here on the land. And I work with the NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Services, is how to turn this swampy land into usable land. And she saw that. She was here, toured the property, and she saw how much work I was doing on the land to do that. To be able to clean the land up at the same time, do it with NRCS, and be able to preserve the water before we went into the stream, which of course goes out to the ocean. And she really liked how I was really working the land, and how I told her, if I'm going to develop this property, this is what I was going to do. Put one house in probably 20 acres, and hopefully they'll all keep it in farming. And I told her that part of the deal was I'm going to work with these guys, that once they buy the property, if they want to, I will keep my cattle there, and they got the tax break for real property tax, because as long as they got the cattle there, they can start building their home, they can start doing all that. So she really liked that idea. And so I continued to do that until finally, more recently, where I was able to finally pay off, all of my debts on the property, for this property, including the development that we did with the water system and many of the systems that we did here. So it was just recently.
How big was the bottle of champagne that you...
Wasn't any. Never celebrated.
No?
Because it never ends. You never know what can happen, again.
So all these many years of paying off this debt, you did it through your cattle business and the sheep?
Well, we were limited too, because at that point we started selling the land too. Part of the land as part of the payoff. And at the end, like I said, always in my mind was, hey, keep half. It's more than you got right now with 4.5 acres on Omao. You got 100 acres, and if you can get that paid off from your development for what you did, be happy. And hopefully these guys in turn will sign a lease back to me so I can continue to run the cattle on their land, which I'm still doing from here to Koloa town. You just see most of the cattle there. So in a way it works out both ways. It works out for the new property owners because their taxes can be kept down as long as they lease it to us to keep it in agriculture.
And talk about the sheep business, because I know that kind of emerged over the years, and what it is that you're doing with the
So
sheep.
take a little break so this dog can get out of here.
The sheep industry, the great grass eaters.
Okay. So with cattle, I also started raising sheep. And That's another business I thought would be good for a lot of the land that we had here that was very hard to maintain, or where cattle was very hard to run cattle in because of the terrain, the side hills. So I brought in some sheep and started with sheep. And after a couple of years of raising sheep, we probably had about 40, 50 sheep, head of sheep to maintain the side hills, areas which we thought wouldn't be as great for cattle to roam on, in flat land rather than those kind of land. We got approached by the solar companies that wanted to do solar on our land, on this land here. And at that time, I had already bought the land from the Knudsen family. And I said, okay, I'm willing to listen and see what you guys want to do, because you said we're going to start doing solar plants here on Kaua'i, because at that time I think they had only one solar plant here, and start selling the electric, back to KIUC. So I said, well, it's a great idea. Why don't we do one? So I got into this solar business where we had a couple acres out here in Lawai that we had a company build a solar plant, and I leased them the land. And also they said, since you're leasing the land, why don't you clean the land and weed eat the land, just kind of keep the place clean, help us and keep the weed down. So I said, great idea. And so we signed a contract to do that. A couple $100, go ahead and keep the weed down. So I had my son Daryl, the older son, came back from working with a company. He's a CPA in Oregon, and said that he's going to come back and work here on Kaua'i with a big company. I said, that's great. I said, why don't you come help me one day out here in the solar farm, because it's hard for me that we got to weed eat all underneath the solar and all that. And he did it. I mean, only 3 hours of work. And he said, Dad, this is hard work, man. Why don't you throw some sheep in here? I said, hey, that's a good idea. I got maybe 50 sheep. Why not throw 25 in there? Throw 25 sheep in there and see, how they do. I said, great idea. So I did. And later on, the companies came back again. Solar City came back. They said, we're building a big, huge solar plant down here, right here in Koloa, on Grove Farmland, right next to the mill. We're talking about being nice where you can use the land and put your sheep in. I said, talk to my son. My son said, I think we got enough land to put sheep in. Why don't we tell them that we'll work out a landscape proposal and throw our sheep in there to keep the grass down? Who's going to keep the grass down? So it went on. We were in conversation with them, trying to negotiate with them. Then I said, no, that's a crazy idea, put sheep in here. I said, you know what, let them go. The guinea grass started taking over the whole plant. And finally, they couldn't even see the panels, because you were talking about 40, 50 acres now. Who's going to be in there with a weed eater? 40, 50 acres, okay? Daryl said, let them go. Let them go. Then they came back to us. They said, I know we had talked to you guys about putting sheep in there, but you guys have enough land, right? I said, yes. And he said, we talked about it, and Daryl said, now's a good time for us to approach them that we want to sign a contract, so we'll maintain all of this. We don't have to tell them how, we're going to maintain all of this for this price, so the guinea grass won't be that high. Then they were wondering, how in the world we're going to do that, right, without working so hard. Then we told them the secret. Well, we're going to have to run sheep in here. Then they laughed too, right? They said, okay, so give us a price to do it. I said, well, what you should do is go out and get a price from landscaping companies, wherever you want to go, and ask them how much would they charge for you guys or for them to do it manually, just manually with gas. All these guys in there. And I said, I think we can do it 20% less, or maybe even 30% less with our idea. And they started laughing again. So I said, okay, let them go. Then they came back, and then so we started doing it because again, it's really hard work. You know, even 40 acres, try to weed eat 40 acres. What are you going to do? How are you going to get under the panels? How are you going to do all of that? Besides all around maintain. So we started with Grow Pump Company, or down here, the Solar City with KIUC, signed the contract with KIUC to bring in about 100 sheep. So we had we had maybe 50, 60, well, close to 100. So we had to take all our sheep down there and started it. And till today we have the contract. Then we got approached by another company again, Solar City, which is now owned by Tesla. While they were building it, they said, hey, you guys did a great job down here. We built that solar plant for KIUC. Now we own the solar plant here in Kaua'i, and we want you guys to give us a price again to do this one. So we did again. So how many acres? About the same acres. Is that okay? We'll keep the same price. That's fine. But then we got to go find another 100 sheep, right? And throw it in there.
Yeah.
So we did. Then we got approached by AES, which is 3 times bigger than all of the solar facilities here on the island. The same way. Hey, we're doing you guys a big favor. You can put all your sheep in here. How many sheep you got? I said, about 200. 200 head. You can put it all in here for free. And I sit in there, Earl looks at them and says, you know what? I don't think we should even sit in here and continue with this conversation because we're already doing 2 places right now with over close to 100 acres with 200 sheep. And now you guys want me to take my sheep and bring them all here for free to use this. So if I could put cattle, it would be nice, but we can't do that. It's got to be sheep. So it took a while. It took them a while, and finally they saw what we were doing. We had to take them there. I had to take them to Tesla a couple times. They all came down, they looked at it, and then they said, okay, give us a price to do this 300 acres. So that's where we had to come in with more sheep, and now we're up to almost 1,200 sheep, or maybe more, to do that. And we're also selling to restaurants and so forth too at the same time. But it slowly grew from a hit of 50 to 100 to 1,200 to 1,400.
So part of being a farmer, from what I'm hearing from you, is about being creative and being patient and being an astute business person.
Well, I think you gotta think out of the box here. How else can you supplement your income? You know, it's okay to just sell lambs to the market, but if you're gonna do that, if you wanna really do that, you're gonna have to run thousands of lambs anyway to do that, especially if you have them buying, 40 head a month, times that by a year. That's a lot of sheep. So this way at least we can run 1,400 head, and if some of the restaurants, or we can guarantee them that we'll supply them so much head, a month, we can do it. And at the same time, we're not really putting out a lot of feed, and we're getting paid to do what we need to do with the land and maintaining the different solar plants in the different land. So it helps, and it also helps us to make a good product go to the market, where it's all grass-fed, and probably as cheaper as we can, as compared to if we had to feed them, keep them in a smaller area, and just try to run it here on Omao ranch land. So it'd be almost impossible to run that amount here.
So another interesting business move you've made in the last chunk of time has been a move towards hemp.
Yes.
So can you, in a nutshell, just kind of give us the origin story? Like, how did you have that idea, and how have you integrated hemp into what you're growing and producing here on the ranch lands?
In 2018, the 2018 Farm Bill, took they talked about hemp, as long as it has 0.3% THC below the level, it will be taken out of the Schedule 1 classification, which means that it will no longer be under an illegal crop once it reaches that point, and also that eventually you will be able to get grants, you will be able to get USDA funding, and registered under USDA for a license also. So I thought that was a great idea, using a small amount of acreage and the type of climate we have. Because under the plant itself, the cannabis plant, we knew that we could do 3 cycles a year. In other words, because of our climate, because of the way it is, you can do 3 cycles rather than 1 cycle or 1 plant a year. So if you have 10 acres, you can plant 10 acres of your hemp plant with roughly about 2,000 plants in an acre. That would be 20,000 plants, right? 2,000 per acre, 10 acres, 20,000 plants. But because you can do it 3 times a year, that would be 60,000 plants you could grow. As compared, you go to the mainland, 60,000 plants, you can only do it 1 time a year because of the climate conditions. So we said, and there was all this talk about some of the benefits of the oil itself. It's more about what we call it's not too much of a health, that we don't want to call it a medical benefit, because there's only one medical benefit or one medical prescription that comes out of the CBD plant right now, called Epidiolex, which will help control seizures and so forth. So, we call it as more of a what would you call it right now? Instead of, it's not something that will make you healthy, but it's like an enhancement thing where it will help you in some ways. It will relieve some, some pressure, or, if you have muscle aches, it can help. So we thought it would be a great idea to do that.
This is a huge departure. All these years you had just run animals through here. You hadn't really raised any crops aside from maybe small farm plot, right? So how were you able to make that switch, even just logistically, to growing plants?
Yeah, that's a good question, because from when we started it, we knew that we would have to have a water supply going to it. How much water, we did all the study about how much water a plant will need, what's the best and most efficient way to do it. And we did have to use part of the county water to do it also, because there was no other resource, and I wouldn't want to pump up the water from the old Hawai'i, so whatever the old water that they had, or the stream water, not knowing what is in the water itself. Plus we're running full organic, right? We're totally organic, and we knew that we could do it with the county water. When the county water sits for a while, we can do our testing to see the levels of any, anything that chlorine levels or anything in there, we can do that. Then we developed a drip irrigation system. And I knew we were always in an area like now. Look, it's raining again. We'll always have some rain in the evening, light in the morning and in the evening. So we started on that, knowing that we could pull it off with what we have. And at the same time started drilling a well. So we are drilling our own well right now to do as we expand. So up to that point, we didn't expand as much. From 2020 or 18, 19, 20 when we started doing all of the ham. But now, once we have our well dug, we can also expand more. But we were able to produce enough product to be able to manufacture enough of what we need to sell currently in today's market. Because we're limited by regulation as to what we can sell or what we can't sell. So
But you're working
it is
on
a
that
shift.
too, right?
Yeah, I work with the legislatures, I work with the governor, I work with the Senate, I work with the House. We draft up legislation, working with them. I get calls from them. If I just got a call on Wednesday from House Representative Ward and different Senate members, Senator Debbert, and wanted our input because we built a state-of-the-art processing center and the only one in the state of Hawaii. And so they know our setbacks. They know, how much we spent to build this, and how is Hawaii going to move forward with this industry? For me, I thought it would be a new sugar crop, like how sugar started in Koloa town. So it was almost like, hey, we can revitalize all of this land now that is sitting fallow, that are here, and I know it's not that easy to just raise cattle, and get the hemp industry going. It was hard, really hard for us, because dealing with the current legislation, dealing with the people in government that, was very difficult, not understanding that we are really growing a legal agricultural product, no different than the papaya or the watermelon or the sweet potato that you get from a farm. No different than that. So that's where we are today, and hopefully we're going to have legislation passed. They're working on it today. I know they were in conference at 2:30 talking about it, and something that the governor will sign and will be more positive for this industry to grow for the state of Hawaii. It's not about us anymore, I'm getting tired. I want to retire. I want to take it easy, but it's about, I look at the potentials of this island itself after the sugar industry went out. What else you guys want to do? What do you want me to do? You want me to sell this land and just get out of here and be happy with money? It's not going to, I don't want to do that, I have farming in my life. I have the preservation of agriculture in my life. I have the preservation of the water system in my system. It's like a blood flow in me, no different. Because how important water is. The water got to be able to make your animals survive. The water got to be able to make you where you can grow your crop. You ain't got that. We ain't got nothing here.
So what's your vision? What's your vision for this beautiful land that you've worked so hard to buy and maintain and, be able to, I better not pet you.
You can.
What is the vision, your vision?
So
for
my
this?
vision of this land is to be able to put this land into a more cultural center type, where people can learn about what we did. We went in, we already got approved to do that. We got approved to be able to build, a larger barn facility where we can hold functions. We can do food to table things here so people can know that this is what is grown here and what you can grow here. We want to do a small retail shop here that sells products like that sell local products from local vendors here, that makes honey, that does their own crop. We want this part of this ranch to be the hub for a lot of that to happen. and to teach people, to teach kids, to take school kids, to show them what you can do to really make this land or the land you have, you know, help to survive or keep the land in agriculture. And that's where we're going right now to do that. We already got approved to do all of that to the Planning Commission. We went through all of that. And we're going to start building the next phase now of this property. I want to do tours. I want to do educational programs here. Again, I said food to table here from local vendors. And be, you know, bring the kids here so they can learn more about agriculture. And hopefully we can revive agriculture again here on the island, which is very difficult to do at this time.
What would you, I mean, how does that contribute? I see your passion, I totally feel it. And I feel that what you're talking about is so much bigger than even this plot of land. Like what you're talking about is preserving Kaua'i.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that larger vision that you have?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're on one of the most beautiful islands in the world. Where do you want to go for vacation? Hello? We're sitting on it right here. You can go to the beach from here less than 20 minutes. You can go to the canyon from here less than an hour. You can hike to Kalalau from here less than 3 hours away. I mean, everybody's coming here. Everybody wants to come to Hawaii, to Kauai. So why not preserve this land the way it is and keep it Kauai so we can all live here and bring up our grandkids, their grandkids, you know, for centuries to come. I mean, why not? Where else?
And that's really even part of the native Hawaiian culture.
Yeah.
You know, talk a little bit about how native Hawaiian culture has inspired or taught you lessons, or if at all, in how you do and what you do.
Well, you know, in our days, you got to remember, you know, working so hard on the farm, the only escape I had was either hunting, fishing, or surfing, or diving, right? I mean, admit it, you know, those days. There wasn't all this computer things, there wasn't all this things where you can stay home and go this and find out what's going on around the world, or where the hell you want to go tomorrow and all that. Instead, it either on the farm, to the beach, do some surfing, or go diving and bring some food home. And, you know, you learn from those guys there. Many of the families were living right down there in Poipu. You take the Kamokea families, you take the Kaulili families, you know, all these guys used to live there. And you learn from that. We used to go out and go diving. They would take us to the diving spots. They would take us to go fishing, how to go out and surround the fish. So I lived all in that era of what they did and how they carried on, you know, their part of surviving, living off the ocean. And in the mountains, I hunt a lot with those that relied on hunting for food. I mean, for centuries they've been doing it. Their families have been doing it and still do it till today. So you learn a lot from that. And, you know, it's hard because, you know, many of those guys are not here anymore. You know, it's slowly, they're not. And this is why I try to teach my son. You know, I took them all hunting from when they were real early to learn values, to learn, you know, that what you shoot or what you have is very valuable for the family, for you folks to have. And I'm not certain how long more this is going to last. You know, it's hard to say. But as long as I'm still kicking and around, I'm going to teach that to my sons and my grandkids. And hopefully they'll carry that on for generations to come.
And to
But I learned from those kapunas.
what would you say to the future generations then? Maybe like your little one age or even the generation not here yet, you know, what would be your advice or your message to them about this land, Kaua'i?
Well, this is why I bring them here a lot. And you see him, he comes here a lot. The little one, he's only like 3 years old, and he's here, walks around like, you know, and my son asked him, why are you walking around like that? Well, Grandpa does that. He had a grass in his mouth the other day. I said, what are you chewing on the grass for? Grandpa does that. Because sometimes, you know, I use it, I just kind of thinking and I have a grass sticking out of my mouth. So they're here, you know, so I try to bring them out to the ranch a lot. I try to teach them, I try to bring them around with us and get them involved with that. But who knows, you know, as time goes on, because, you know, our days, like I said, we never had all this fancy kind of stuff. You know, we never had where you can sit down all day and either. I don't know if they're learning anything on that or not, but hopefully, you know, some of my blood, as you can tell, it's already passed on to Kai, because how he works, how he does that, can be passed on to my grandkids for generations to come. So, you know, it's hard to say, especially with modernization nowadays.
But you're doing everything that you can.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's why I'm keeping this.
Yeah.
If not, I would dump it.
Take your money and run, yeah?
Well, who knows? I mean, at least don't have to do nothing.
Yeah, right.
We just relax. And maybe, you know, I can sleep in instead of getting up at 5 in the morning and worrying so much about what we got to do or about that sheep. Just, you know. So it gets really, especially with animals, you know what I mean? I don't care what, you're always going to be there to take care of the animal until its last breath. And it's hard, but that's how it's been, yeah, for us.
That's who
as
you
farmers.
are. Yeah.
But hopefully that will carry on for generations to come. But I think, you know, I'm hopeful that the hemp industry is going to make a comeback. I'm hoping that people will see more of that now too, which is hemp and the benefits of hemp and what it can do for the economy. So perhaps the kids can get into learning into that. They can go into chemistry. There's all this other stuff that makes that part or the segment of this particular plant very useful for kids that are growing up now. It's one of the best ways. Marketing is another one too. How to market these products. You know, a lot of things like that can happen. Because when you deal with a product like that, you're dealing with a product that has a lot of benefits and got to be handled in a special way and takes a lot of chemistry to be able to do that. And takes a lot of good marketing because it's so competitive. So with an industry like this, one day we'll have kids, even though they're good on computers now, will be much better doing computers and figuring out what is wrong with that one plant there. How can we fix that? Or how can we make that one plant better? You know? So there's a lot of opportunities that will pop up. And that's what I'm hoping, that with this industry, it can do that. Cattle, sheep, you know, will always be cattle and sheep. You market it, you slaughter it. But with this new industry coming up, there will be great opportunities for Hawaii and for a lot of the Kaua'i people to get into horticulture, to get into things like that, to get it more involved with agriculture. You know, not about only growing, but also scientifically get involved with the plant itself. So I see a bright future for the island in that way.
May it be so.
Well, you can only hope.
Unless something better comes along, right?
What's better? Recreational marijuana?
Maybe in 2 years. Is that your schedule?
Yeah, but I mean, but you're still going to have to you're still going to be very scientific about it. You're still going to have to meet all the requirements. It's almost like producing a medicine. You have to have a PhD degree in this. You see? So same thing with the hemp industry. In order to develop more, to do all of that, you still got to do that too. You got to be a PhD to figure all this out. That's why I got these guys in there. You ask me anything about this plant, I only can tell you, how nice it's going to grow and that stuff. But what it comprises is all different. And there's over 25,000 uses of a cannabis plant, right?
Wow.
That's a fact. That's for real. Over 25,000 uses of that one plant. So it's a big opportunity for everybody here.
Yeah. All started here.
Well, I don't know, man. I'm still struggling with what's going on. So we'll see. Got to start someplace, though.
Yeah.
We got to try to be an example someplace. So hopefully, that's all we can do is hope.
I think that you're setting an extraordinary example.
Well, we don't want to be a legend in anything, especially in things like that. But I think at the end, when everybody knows about it, everybody sees the value, everybody sees that this is a value crop, and everybody says, well, my boy is a scientist working for that company. He's a PhD, and he's the one doing this. And that's amazing.
And there's a place for him here, right?
Yes.
That someone with that learning can find a job in Kaua'i.
Yeah, that's what I said. But we got to get this industry going.
Yeah.
How do you make your best use of the land you have? And if you want to keep it. Now, if you want to buy this land and turn around and make millions on it, that's a different story. But we're here to keep the land for generations and generations. And how do we do it? It's not easy right now with the cost of things, cost of everything, cost of goods. You got to work the land. You got to come up with ideas for how you can supplement working on a farm like this.
And this inspiration, that this intention that you have to keep this land for generations and generations, why is that so important to you?
Because we're limited on the amount of land you got on this island. We're not growing, it's not blowing up. You don't see volcanoes expanding this island anymore. We're done. We're the oldest island, if you think about it, right? You don't see any more land. There's none. And a lot of these large land, or most of the landowners are all big corporations. They're going to sell out to big companies for big money. What's going to happen to all of us? Bye-bye. That's right. So it's very important because one day, Koloa is not going to be Koloa. Koloa is going to be right back here. It's going to be touching this land. Well, it is right now. Across there, everything is now owned by A and B, and it's a new buyer. Across there is all Grofam. Up there is all Kanutin. Where will you find any more land like this where somebody or my kids could afford? They can't even buy a half acre anymore around here. So why not just keep them? If you can survive on it, then you got to be able to. Because everybody think, sure, you got this land paid off. It's okay, you got this. They don't realize how much money it takes because you got to be out here keeping this land the way the land is. You got to do the water system too. You got to make sure the water's all flowing. You got to keep the place clean. You got to make sure the animal has food. You got to do this. What happens if they don't have food? We got to buy food. We got to buy hay. And that's costly. It costs thousands of dollars to feed all these animals, to do all of that. A lot of people don't think this, it's not the point. We have a tower that pays us too, right? I have a tower right here. I have a solar plant, which they pay me lease to for. But it's not enough. Every day you get something pop up, you get fence in here, you get fixing here, doing things there, man. No end. And it's not going to be any easier for my kids because the cost is always, it's not coming down. It's going up.
But you have your son Kai. He seems very
Yeah.
committed.
And Errol too. Errol is good, right? He's a CPA.
Hmm.
So they probably would know what to do with his land.
You're hoping.
I'm open, but until I'm alive, they ain't gonna sell them anyway. So too bad for them.
You got to stay around a good long time.
Well, they better work them hard because, you know, I'm getting tired too already. So.